We're just going to get right into the meat and potatoes with this one. Mm-hmm. What would you say is your main tactic? So like kind of what Jacob just referenced, he gave his version, but like how would you describe what you do?
Like absolutely rut hunting. And I hunt trails and I hunt scrapes specifically. If you take a scrape that you found scouting and you put a camera on it, which we have now, you've got access to cameras. So if you put a camera on it all deer season long, there's a very good chance that for the next 20 years, you're going to get bucks in that same spot. You may have to go in there and make a mock scrape in that same spot, but there will be bucks there for a reason before you ever showed up, and they'll be there from then on. And it's just a matter of how big the deer is and what you're okay with shooting, what you're looking for, what you're targeting. You do that 20 or 30 times or as many times as you want of properties, then it gives you an idea of what's there and when it's there. So like that's how I hunt, because I mean, I've never been, a lot of guys hunt bedding early and stuff like that, but I never had the consecutive days to be able to find one deer and try to figure out where he was at during daylight and the little bit of traveling. So the big travel areas, I just take and find the sign, put the cameras up, and I focus on that specific spot. But it's all rut.
Now, Andrew, I got to cut you off real quick because I know you want to jump in. Daniel, give us some background of what you're doing. Now you're working for yourself. You're a full-time taxidermist, have a YouTube channel, everything that you're doing now. So you have a lot more flexibility. But what got you to cause, or based off your work schedule, family, everything, the last 15, 20 years, what got you to this point? Like, why did you have to get to this point of trying to be as strategic as possible based off a limited schedule?
Right. Well, I was a meat market manager. I worked in grocery stores. So, like, working retail, you worked all Christmas, all Thanksgiving, New Year's, Easter, most of deer season, turkey season is holidays, and you work 10, 15 days in a row. So the days that I was off, I had to try to make the best of it. And, growing up when I was a kid, everybody knows those spots where people kill most of the big deer. Especially if you're in a hunting club, it'll be stand whatever. Stand 3 always has a big deer come off of it. And I thought that spot was just good. You didn't know why, but you always thought somebody got lucky on that stand, or that stand's due and somebody needs to hunt it. And we never paid that much attention about when the deer were killed there or anything else. You just knew that if you sat there every time you got a chance to, eventually you'd get lucky. And over a period of time, I just cut out all the other stands because I couldn't come but once every 2 or 3 weeks, maybe for 2 days. And I would just sit there every single time. Daylight to dark, I'd sit there all day long, and eventually I'd kill me a nice buck. And it kind of started with that. And then as I got a little bit older, I started noticing specific areas where deer were getting killed, where it wasn't just stand 3, it was stand 3, 4, and 5. And then as I got a little bit older, I started paying more attention to dates, because it was like, if I'm off, let's say I'm off after Christmas, when everybody else, like if the rut, like let's say the rut is quote unquote Christmas week, and everybody's like, that's when I'm taking off. Everybody's off and they hunt those dates, and that's when everybody kills the most deer. A lot of times because it's when the most people are there. But maybe the rut is going on then. But what I started noticing was the days that I was off, I could find where deer were at those days, and that's when I killed those deer in those spots. And the more I had to do that, the more I paid attention to the exact dates to make sure I just was off work on the right days. Well, then they invented game cameras. So it was like you could actually go in, and rather than using where you had seen deer, where other deer had been killed, you go in there and put up cameras. But like even before cameras, like if you've got past information, like let's say you've got backlogs on books, or even your own deer, like if you had no information to go on, I mean, you've had this conversation before, like if you show me a map and you know how to scout, if people know what to look for, you got a question?
No, keep going. Okay. I got a point we're going to talk about after this. Keep going.
Well, like if you know how to scout, and y'all have got enough podcasts and videos, like people can listen to y'all's content and they can learn how to find a buck. So if you can find a buck, if you can find sign, that's all you need to do is find sign. If you can do that, then you can put a camera on it. And then once you find out when those deer are there, then all you have to do is be off those days. Now, if you can't, then you just need more cameras or more information. So like somebody that's got their own lease, let's say somebody's hunting family land for 20 years. Well, a lot of my clients, Like, it doesn't do me any good to give somebody bad information because I'm a taxidermist. So, like, the more big deer people kill that are my clients, the better off I am. So like if they come in there and they're like, man, you know, my dad killed a 160 10 years ago off of this side of this cliff, but it was just like a fluke accident. Like, he was on the side of a cliff and he couldn't hunt nowhere else. Just went and sat down and this buck come up the hill. I'm like, well, how many times have y'all hunted there again? And they're like, never, man. It's on the side of a cliff. Like, must have been like an accident. I'm like, no. Like, if he killed a 160 on the side of a cliff, like, the biggest deal on that property is on the side of that cliff right now. Like, you know, and I actually had that happen last year. A guy went in there, and legitimately, I got him to look back at the dates. This was like 10 years ago, and this deer was killed on a specific date. He was actually going to be off that day about 2 weeks later. I told him, I said, do not go in there at all. Those days, if you can be off those few days before or after, go in there and sit there every single day. And the first day he went in there, he killed about a 130-inch 7-point. The next day, his wife went in there and killed a 140 10-point out of the same exact tree. And they've never hunted. It was their lease. They've had it for like 20 years. And that's the only 3 times they've ever sat there. You know what I mean? Like, after killed a 160, they never even hunted it again in that spot because it wasn't where they had planned on going. It's where they ended up, and they killed that buck and just didn't give it a second thought. But it doesn't, like, a lot of people are worried about why deer do what they do. If you kind of, especially if you're just getting started, it's too much to try to understand and comprehend. If you can see when they're doing what they're doing and then hunt them, you'll understand why they do what they do. You'll start to notice when you're scouting what they're doing and where they're coming from.
I want to jump back just to make sure that people caught that, because you mentioned that, like, that deer, the 160 had been killed, you said 10 years?
A long time ago, yeah.
Years before, and just based on the date that deer was killed, you were
Correct.
Like, go in there next week.
Yeah, I actually told them, because they were laughing about it, and they were like, that just sounds ridiculous, you know, but I had, I won't say this to say this, but like, I had a lease right by the house that was 1,700 acres back several years ago. And what really got me focused in on the dates was I had 1,700 acres and I had exclusive access to it. Nobody else could hunt it. I did. And I went in there, put up cameras where I needed to and everything. And all of a sudden, I didn't have a deer on camera for like 5 months. And I'm like, where's all these deer at? Because I know there's scrapes, I know there's sign. Well, I left them, and I was checking them about every 2 weeks. I didn't have anywhere else to hunt. It was right when I first moved, and I was just going in there and checking cameras and trying to hunt. Well, all of a sudden, I had about 10 or 15 bucks show up, and they were there for about 10 days, and then they left. And out of 365 days I had cameras up, I had bucks. Those 10 to 12 days was the only days of the whole year that I had a buck on camera. And I did it for several years in a row. I think it was 6 years. Ended up killing 8 bucks out of one tree within about a 6-day period, and had no bucks on camera the rest of the entire year in that whole spot. And what I learned from that was it was not hunting pressure. It was not nocturnal movement. It wasn't any of that. Those bucks were not there. They were somewhere else the rest of the time, and they came there. And the more I did it, the more I realized, because I think out of 8 deer, I think I killed 4 on December the 4th on one specific day. So I started, does have got a 3-day estrus cycle. So if you break down an estrus group, because that's usually what people go by, is, first off, it's really broad. It'll be our rut is this week. Mm-hmm. Well, you can forget that. Go down, break that down into these doe groups is this week. Well, no, not that either. Go down to this doe is 3 days. The camera I put behind my house, me and you talked about this last year, just as like an experiment. I put a camera literally 100 yards from the back of my house, put out a corn pile, just to see what would happen. Well, I had a group of 9, there was a group of 5 does and a group of 4, 2 different family units. So would fight each other over the corn pile. They'd be there at the same time sometimes, but hated each other. It was funny. Well, I mean, they literally like punching each other.
Typical women.
I know, it's insane.
I'm joking. I'm joking. All the women listeners.
That's Jacob Myers. Yeah. What's that email address?
Jacob at thesouthern.outdoorsman.com.
Right. But anyway, these does came in and they showed up I put the camera out probably the 1st of August, and the does showed up about September and were there daily and nightly. I mean, they were in there all the time. Well, about, November the 10th, something like that, I had a spike show up. And the next day, a 6-point showed up. Over the next week, I had 6 different bucks come to that spot. And after about 10 days, they all left. And I have not gotten a picture of them after that. And they were, specifically, I've got 15 acres. And I remember I told you, I will give you permission to hunt my property for 355 days a year. And you can sit there every single day for free. If you'll let me hunt that 1 week, and I'll kill 6 bucks and you'll never see one. That's how specific it is.
And by the
I
way-
can prove that on every piece of property. Like I've done it over and over and over again.
And by the way, guys, we're not talking about hunting out of season, okay? It's just
Right. And we're also not talking about hunting beds. So
Yeah.
all you bed guys, it's like, no. Like but this is the rut. Like this is where most people struggle that hunt beds, and the rut hits and they're like, well, it's too unpredictable. It's not. What the deer you're going to see, it's going to be harder to target a specific buck. But the advantage to it is you can take those areas if you can find. And what I like about scrapes is if you look down a historical rub line and find multiple scrapes, 9 times out of 10, over half of those scrapes are going to be at an intersection. It may not be an intersection that you recognize, but as you get to learn about terrain and everything else, there will be saddles a mile away, or there will be a creek system, or there will be a ridge line with fingers coming off of it or something, and those scrapes will be in spots. If you remember us looking at your map, when we were going through there, and I kept zooming out, I was like, well, hang on a second. I'd zoom out, zoom out, and zoom out. You can see how the deer are traveling based on the terrain and by the cover, where the cutovers are. The deer are going to follow those, and it may be over a 10-mile range where it may not be one buck. He may not go 10 miles, but all the deer in general are following these cutovers across the entire, terrain. Well, as you find those scrapes where they're supposed to be, where the deer are traveling, it's basically intersections. So what you may do is where you've got a guy that is hunting a buck on a point, this bedding. You've got another guy hunting a buck in this drainage and a guy hunting a buck on a saddle. Well, if you find this hub, this spot where you're getting pictures of 4 or 5 bucks during a 3 or 4 day period every year, you can sit there for 3 days and possibly see every buck that 5 different guys is hunting. Well, then 3 days later, you move and go over to the next one that your dates are at. So you can constantly move, and really, honestly, what you're doing is hunting the rut for 2 months. The rut is not this week, like at this club. The rut is those 3 days when this doe is in heat. And what I started, the more cameras I put out, the more pictures I got of the same buck completely on different ends of our entire property that were there on the dates they were supposed to be. And the bucks knew where to be when that doe was in heat.
So there's a couple things we got to bring it back down.
Yep.
Bring it back down. Okay. Number one, to simplify for everybody what we're talking about. We're talking about annual patterns. Number one. Okay. So when you're talking about using these trail cameras and putting them specifically, I know you like scrapes, and again, like high traveled areas with scrapes and also trails, is you're looking for that date range of when a quality of buck that you're looking to hunt is showing up, preferably during daylight, or does it matter if it's at night too?
It has to be during daylight.
Okay.
If you get nighttime pictures, you might as well throw the pictures in the garbage. It's not really, it's going to tell you a buck's in the area, and there's a very good chance you might be able to kill him during the rut because you may just be a little off of where he's at. He may not be traveling that far. But what I've also noticed is sometimes, well, more times than not, you will not get the picture of one buck twice, and they're usually going the same direction. So some of it, I believe, and this is just me saying this, but I believe that a buck is not going to be traveling around, walking around during daylight, unless he's at the mercy of a hot doe, not during the rut. You know what I mean? If it's during the rut, and he's there at 11 in the morning walking around the middle of nowhere, because a lot of the deer I kill is in wide open hardwoods. Like I'm not hunting thickets. You know what I mean? I'm not, but it's where he's at every year during that day. And it may not be because there's a doe in heat where I'm sitting. I probably saw 2 does last year. And the only ones I saw were getting chased by bucks. But it's when they're coming through there going to wherever it is they're going. So there may be a specific spot on a trail where 4 or 5 bucks come by in a few day period going to a spot where there may be a hot doe for a few days then. So what I think is happening is you just have to be right there during those days because he's there during daylight. Whereas when he gets to where he's going, he may not do a lot of traveling until it's dark, until he goes to the next spot or whatever, because, they're going to move during the day and they're going to move at night. But if you get pictures at night, all your pictures are at night. That's tended to be more, you'll get some mixed, obviously, here or there, but there's going to be a period of time when you're going to have all the bucks are going to be there.